Welcome everybody. Today is a very special session because today is the first time we are doing a session outside India. And it takes me great pleasure to introduce a very close friend of mine, Tim Coxon, who's the head pro at Mickleover Golf Club. And I've known him for close to 25 years, and he's one of the finest teachers in the UK. And we also have with us Lee Mason, who's represented England as a junior. And they're both going to share their experience, and they're going to give us some tips on golf and how to play golf. And if you have any questions, please type them out. I'll keep repeating it. So if you have questions regarding the golf swing or wedges or putting, any kind of golf questions, I will put them out to them. Welcome, Tim. Welcome, Lee. Are you there?
Yes, we're both here. Well, I'm here.
Yeah, we're here, yeah.
Right. So, Tim, I think we'll start with you.
Yep.
So, we'll have the camera on Tim.
Okay.
Tim, over to you. You've got about 8-10 minutes to talk about anything about golf that you want to talk about.
Yeah, thanks indeed. So I'm just going to move back in and crouch down for a second. So basically, thank you very much for that introduction. As Indy quite rightly points out, we've been close friends for 20-25 years. He's been over here to the UK, very close to my golf club. I'm currently I live about 10 miles away from my golf club. Lee, who's worked with me for the last 13 or 14 years at the golf club, also lives close by. We're obviously doing all the social distancing in this crazy situation, and we're trying to maintain a golf business and interact with people from all over the UK, Europe, and of course now worldwide. So I've been a pro for 30 years with the British PGA, and I've been at my present club for close on to 26. So you know, I'm not going anywhere soon. Basically,
Tim, just to interrupt, you'll need to speak a little louder so it's a little audible.
Yeah,
sorry about that.
That's fine. So basically, what I'm going to try and just talk to you about today in this garden setup that we've got here is some fundamentals about golf. So we're obviously going to start with the grip. And when I talk to you guys, I'm talking to you as a right-handed player. So if there are any left-handers out there, apologies. Whilst I can hit it left-handed and play, I will just be going through this session as a right-handed player. Now, one of the things that people always ask me the question when they come for a lesson is that, you know, why am I hitting it to the right? Why am I slicing it? Why am I hitting it not as far as I should be? And a lot of the time you can trace the problems and the errors back to the setup and certainly back to the grip. So if you can imagine that when you're putting your hands on, as long as your hands are going on the golf club and they're in this neutral position, which we've probably all been shown about. I mean, I use an overlapping grip. Some people will use an interlocking grip. If your hands are going on into this neutral position here, it's much easier when we come to do some things later in a moment on the actual setup for your body and your body shape to be set right to enable you to get the golf club back correctly. So what tends to happen when I see a lot of golfers come to me, and it might be just the people over in the UK, a lot of them have a very, very strong grip, which means the left hand's far too far to the right, showing an awful lot of knuckles, which then tends to make a difference to this right hand. So you get a very strong right hand here. Now that in theory would mean that the ball would go over to the left and create a hook. But what happens is they get into such a wide variety of positions on their backswing that they often produce a slice from this strong grip. They'll read books about saying that they've got a slice and they need to strengthen the grip, but it actually tends to make a difference to the club face and start to make it turn, which causes a problem. So I tend to use one of these when we're just starting, which is a grip trainer. Okay, it's only on a wedge, and I get a lot of people just to hit some shots out with this old Cleveland wedge, with this grip trainer, which I'm sure you can purchase, which gets your hands set in a really good neutral position. Second thing I like to focus on, I'm just going to crouch down and be close to the camera for a moment, is the pressure, grip pressure. Again, certainly when people come for lessons, they're often nervous, but if they're going to be nervous on the golf course, whether it be the first tee, playing with their buddies for, a small wager or just really pride or in a competition. And what tends to happen when you're nervous is that you'll start to hold the club very, very tight. So they create excessive grip pressure. And it's usually for these right-handed golfers in this left hand, because that's the one that's at the top of the club. That's the one that's kind of holding the golf club a little bit more. It's applied to the grip to the golf club first. And what happens is the forearm and the wrist tend to lock up. So if you couple that with some of the positions I showed you a second ago, like the strong, lots of knuckles on the back of the left hand and a very, very tight grip that you squeeze in the left hand, it's very difficult for that golf club when it comes through at impact to A, get into a position that's square, and B, making sure that you're getting the ball out the centre of the club. It's really difficult for it to find that path. So what we're trying to make sure that you do once you've got your hands in position is that we just feel that this is basically like a stick with a weight on the end. Let's feel the club head and let's just feel it waggle about a little bit. And you can see I'm not doing that with my hands. That's just the force of the weight on the end of the stick. I'm really relaxed and I can feel that happening. Now, if we can maintain that when we start to play a shot later on, what will happen there is the club will what we call release through the ball, but the grip pressure is nice and relaxed. We're trying to make sure that the grip pressure, it's hard to put a number on it. You should just make sure that your pressure is with the fingers and not particularly with the palm or the thumb. If you're squeezing with the palm or the thumb, you're going to create this very, very tight muscle in here. Okay, so that would be the first thing that we would try and do. Just moving away from the camera a second, picking my golf club back up. We'd then try and move into a position where we're looking for alignment. So I've set this up here. You can see down my screen, there's a pole, which is the alignment. I've got a ball just on my practice mat here. I've put in my grip on. And then the second thing I'd do before I go and cut to Lee in a second, just so he's going to talk to you about wedges, I'm going to make sure my hands are on in a square position. You'll have heard that term, neutral, and the club face is nice and straight. If we get our hands in this position, but then we lift the club face up, and it is indeed like that, then, of course, as soon as we move the golf club to square or to straight, you'll find that the hands have now moved into an incorrect position. So you're getting a relationship between the grip of the club and the club face. So it's about how your hands are applied to the grip of the club and you're maintaining that leading edge that it's in nice and straight, so that when you come to address the ball in relation to your target, when you're playing on the driving range or the golf course, they actually are connected. We're looking to keep those connected and making sure that they're all okay there. And the final thing, as you're moving in there, you're trying to keep that grip pressure nice and relaxed. Okay, and so my hands aren't coming off when I'm doing this. They're not coming off the club, not releasing. It's nice and loose. You'll never get the golf club off me. I won't let go. But of course, that's nice and relaxed, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, so any questions on that, Indy, at the moment?
Yes. So what should the grip pressure be like?
Well, a lot of people over here have used the term, if you're picking up a little bird and you're trying to hold the bird so it doesn't get out of your hands and fly away, but you're certainly not trying to hold it so it's too tight that you'd harm it. That's how we try and give an example when we're teaching people over here in the UK. Everybody will have a different example. But at the end of the day, you're trying to make sure that your muscles aren't tense. You can still hold the club. You can still hold the club, and I've got to ask my daughter to try and pull this golf club off me now. It's really, really light, but she's not listening. So you can still hold the golf club. Hello, there, Millie, come here. So my hands are relaxed, look. Come on, this is just a good thing. Come on, here's Millie, it's only 9. Try and take the golf club off me. Pull it, go on. Look, up. Because I'm holding it in the fingers. And that's basically stops all your forearm muscles and your hands becoming locked and swinging very much like a robot. Thanks, Millie.
So does and playing a fade?
Yes.
Okay, so does playing a fade or a draw? Could you play that shot by changing your grip?
Yes, you could. But it's harder, in my opinion, to control by changing your grip. If you wanted to play a real sharp fade and you was trying to get around some trees because you're in trouble, you'd set up for a fade, which we'll talk about shortly, and you'd change your swing for a fade. But what you're also trying to do, you'd arguably weaken your grip slightly, so you go a little bit to the left and show less knuckles on the back of the hand because you're trying to play maybe a recovery shot. If I was setting up on the tee and wanted to aim it from the left side of the fairway down to the right side of the fairway with a little fade, I wouldn't change my grip. I'd change my swing.
Right. So Tim, there is another question. It's about hip rotation. So I think Tim, so there is a question on hip rotation. What is the correct amount of hip rotation, and how does it happen during the downswing?
Okay, well, I'm guessing from that question is when it says how does it happen during the downswing, when you're...
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So if you can just tell us how the hips act through the swing.
Okay, so if we've got to the... Can you all hear me? Can you hear me, Andy?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so we've turned up to the top of our backswing and we're in here. You can see we've not only got shoulder rotation, which for me is about 90 degrees, and we've got hip rotation, which is approximately half of that. We're trying to make sure we don't overturn, which would get us into a position where the golf club would be what we call a little bit flat. So we're trying to maintain some stability here in the hips, and as our shoulders turn, our hips will turn about 40, 45 degrees. And as we start down to come down to strike the ball, for me, again, and this is how I get my clients to do it, my pupils to do it, it's about getting the hips just starting off. They're starting to turn through the ball. What a lot of club golfers is that they turn all this a little bit late and they get what I call a bit army. So they'll turn back and they start down very fast with the shoulders and the club, of course, but of course they're now out of sync with the hips because they've not really moved them. They try and hit the ball hard rather than trying to rotate the body through the ball by leading with the hips here. So if we look from that angle, up at the top, and it's as we come down, you can see that left hip starts to turn and moves into position.
So how much on a backswing, how much should the hips turn?
Well, again, I try and restrict people to their shoulders, because if you restrict your shoulders to 90 degrees, it's quite difficult to turn the hips anymore. I mean, there'll be somebody that probably can, but again, I try and control how these turn by how the shoulders turn. If somebody has got a lot of flexibility in the middle part of the body, I'd also just try and make sure they keep this left knee maybe a little bit more flexed on the way back, which would restrict how much your hips turn there. So this left knee, as you turn, you just don't bend it, but just keep a little bit of pressure and shape in it. And as you turn there now, it does restrict your hips, which will create a little bit more power, depending on your ability and your handicap, for example.
Right. So is there anything else you want to add, Tim, before we go to Lee? And then we'll come back to you.
We'll come back to me and we'll talk a little bit about posture, setup, ball position, stance and aim and things like that then.
Right. So can we go over to Lee? Hi, Lee.
Hi, right.
Yeah. So can we have the camera to Lee, please?
Okay.
Lee, you're going to talk about the short game.
Yeah, so basically I'm going to talk a little bit about bounce, grind, and then a little bit about club selection, etc. around the greens and pitching. First of all, like Tim says, I've been professional sort of 14, 15 years now. I'll just give you a little bit of background information about myself. Played for England boys as a child, or a junior, should I say. And won Midland titles, Derbyshire titles, county titles as such. So I've played a fair bit. I've sort of retired from the playing side now. I've got a family. It's the typical case of growing up and getting a house and a mortgage, etc. But dreams shattered, right? But anyway, so firstly, when people are looking at buying, loves to buy a set of irons, they love to hit the ball miles, etc. But as a lot of pros know and will say, it actually can make little effect on your scoring sometimes. Whereas obviously the wedges and the putters is where all the scores are going to be made. Now, one of the sort of less less asked questions in the shop at our place is what wedges should I have, what bounce should I have, etc. on my wedges. Now, we never really ever get asked about bounce, and it's one of the most pivotal things when buying a wedge. Yet people just seem to walk up, pick a wedge out. Oh, this feels all right. Oh, that I want a 56 degree. I want a 52 degree, whatever they think, and they just buy it and off they go. Well, I've actually seen people myself who literally say to me, they cannot chip. I cannot chip, Lee. I need a lesson. Okay, so I take them up to the practice ground. We go around the green, and I'm watching them chip, and their action sometimes maybe isn't too bad, or it is a certain set way, but the wedge they've got in their hands is just simply not going to work for them. And then I've changed the wedge, and instantly within 1 or 2 shots, oh, that's a lot easier. What have I been doing wrong in the past? I said, well, you've just had the wrong bounce wedge or grind of wedge for your action. So basically, I'm going to talk a little bit about bounce, and I'm going to presume that a lot of people don't know much about bounce. Some of it you may know already, but we'll start at the basics. So bounce. So bounce is, and if I'm able to share a picture now, I'll try to. Let's go to my screen. So share. Right. So bounce. Let's get my screen out of the way. Everyone can see this okay? Can we see that okay, everyone?
Yep.
Can we see the bounce angle picture yet? Yeah, perfect. Okay. So basically, bounce angle, it is the bottom of the sole, okay? It's the angle of the sole. It's not the loft. Don't confuse it with the loft. It's the actual sole angle. So as you see in the picture here, we've got bounce angle, high bounce, standard bounce, low bounce. Now, what you're looking at is the bottom edge, as I say. You can notice in the high bounce angle, the bottom edge is pointing up a lot. They're all exactly the same loft, but the bottom edge of the sole on the high bounce wedge is pointing up. The standard bounce is pointing a bit more down towards the floor, and the low bounce is really pointing down towards the floor. So that gives you a rough idea of what the bounce is doing. It's the sole and what happens with the leading edge into the ball. Okay, so if I just come back to you, hopefully this will work. Yeah, so you're back with me now. So to give you an idea, this is the way I sort of simplify it and make it sort of, I think this is a simplistic way of looking at it. If I just angle my camera down, so here we've got a ball on like a nice piece of mat here. The way I would look at it is, a low bounce wedge is very much like a knife coming into the ball, okay? So a low bounce wedge will have a sharp edge, will want to get into the ground, okay, and nip under the ball. So if you're someone who's coming in from a certain angle, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, you might suit a low bounce wedge where the knife will come in and nip under the ball, and then off it goes, okay? A high bounce wedge acts very much like a spoon, okay? I know you're impressed by this, but the spoon will basically come down into the ball, and it doesn't want to really dig underneath. It wants to hit the ground and bounce off it. Bounce off it very much. So imagine a lot of sand wedges are like a spoon. Okay, so think of it like that. Sand wedge like a spoon. Imagine this is all sand. You don't want the knife in the bunker, because if the knife goes into the sand, what's going to happen? Soft surface, bang, in you go, okay? You want the spoon. So that's high bounce, okay? Coming down, it's not going to dig. It's going to bounce off the surface and carry on through, okay? So that's the way I think of it. Low bounce knife, high bounce spoon, okay? And that will give you a rough idea of where I'm going to go with the rest of the conversation in a little bit. Okay, so the first thing a lot of you might be saying, if you come back up to me, is how do I know what bounce I've got on my wedges? Okay, well, some of you, it's very easy. So, for instance, again, I'm going to go and share a screen now. If I can get it on. Okay, share screen. So, I'll just show you this picture here, if you can see that. I don't know why I've got smoking all over it, but I have. Ignore that. Anyway, the wedge at the top, you'll see here, it's got a 12 under the number 60. So 60 obviously represents the loft. The 12 is the bounce number. Now, typically, a high bounce is a high number. So to give you a rough idea again, Bouncers really could be anything from 0, which is no bounce. Generally, I've not seen anything above 16, I think is the highest. There may be more that are higher, but 16 is the highest I've seen. So if you think back to the spoon and knife sort of thinking, the 12s, the 13s, the 14s, the 16s of the world are the spoon, and the 0s, the 2s, the 4s, the 6s are like the knife, okay? So that's the little number, which you'll see on a lot of your wedges, is representing bounce, okay? So it's a visual mark. If for some reason, okay, I'll come back to me now. Okay, if for some reason you haven't got that number on your wedges, and some of them don't for some reason, especially some of the older ones, they don't, you can roughly, just like you see in the pictures, hold your club up and try and look at the bottom sole and get a rough idea of, okay, is my sole pointing down or is it pointing up? Okay, and try, again, forget about the loft, just look at the sole. Which way is the sole sort of pointing? You can get a rough idea from that. It is better if you have the number, because sometimes, especially when we talk about grinding, that can get a bit confusing if you're just looking at it. But I would say, if you can, have a look. But if it's on there, brilliant. You know exactly what you're working with. What you'll tend to find is a lot of clubs, sort of, you can get different ones. A lot of the, like for instance, Cleveland have a dot system on there, as I used to, where 1 dot was low bounce, 2 dots was standard, 3 dots was high bounce. Because generally, like I said before, clubs will follow a bounce sort of, they presume you're going to use a club in a certain situation. So I'll give you an example. They'll presume, a lot of these club manufacturers and makers, that everyone uses a sand wedge out of a bunker. So generally, sand wedges tend to be 12, 14, 16 degrees of bounce, for example. Whereas a lob wedge, which a lot of people will use around the greens for those high floaty little shots over bunkers, etc., not probably doing a lot of pitching with it. Some people, again, it's generalized. They will use their low bounce on that. So that would be 2, 4, 6. Generally, if you look at those clubs, you'll tend to find that they factor in clubs into certain areas of bounce, rightly or wrongly, because some people don't. You might be standing there at the minute, sitting there thinking, hang on a minute, I always use my lob wedge out of the sand, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But they have to sort of generalize, but you obviously can adapt them slightly as well. Okay. I don't know if you want to pass back over to Tim now, so that, because that's what I'll talk about next.
Before we go to Tim, Lee, there are a couple of questions for you.
Yep.
So, if you could talk about a good pitch shot setup.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, this is it's very sort of open to sort of what people, without seeing someone. So, for instance, what I'd say, so if you're talking about, let's say, ball position, start off with, you'll get some coaches who will tell you ball in the middle. You'll get some coaches to say ball forward and middle, and you'll get some coaches who say ball on your left heel, right forward. You use the bounce a bit more, etc. Because it seems to be the newer method at the minute of using the bounce a lot more into your shots, where the old-fashioned way tend to be a bit more centralised with your ball position and chopping down into the ball. My take on it is the ball position you can put it where you want, as long as your weight is sat forward of the ball. So if you're someone who can really get the weight over, yeah, by all means, get the ball on your left heel, lean onto your front foot. That's always pivotal. Well, I always like to think of a mark on your shirt, like your button or your centre point or your nose or your mouth, and just make sure that gets in front of the golf ball when you're setting up. So you're leaning onto your leading foot. Obviously, for me, left footed because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, onto your right foot. So weight forward is pivotal. Stance width, again, depending if you're close to the green or further away. If you're very close, I would say almost a club head's width apart, very narrow. As you start to track further away from the green, you're moving away more from chipping to pitching, I widen the stance up to the point where if I'm then full shot away, I'm shoulder width. So when you're very close, you're very narrow. And as you're moving away from the green, you're widening up that stance, just because you need a bit more of a base because you're making a bigger turn. People will ask about, should I grip up or down the grip? Well, again, there's no right or wrong answer for this. Try what works for you. I've seen tour players grip at the top of the grip. I've seen tour players grip it at the bottom. So again, try what works for you. There is no real right answer for that. And then to be honest, a lot of it is what sort of Tim said with the grip and the setup. It's all very much the same as a full swing. if that sort of covers any.
Okay. So what would you do different for a lob shot?
For a lob shot, obviously, if you're playing a lob shot, your whole purpose, you've probably got to get it over something. So for me, that's the one where I'd be less flexible with the ball position. I'd have it right forward in my stance. I'd have it real forward towards my front foot. But again, and this is where it's tricky, a lot of people will start to try and lean back. It's so much of a tendency. They think, I need to get this up, and everything in your human nature says, lean back, lift. No. That is the worst thing you can do. You will guarantee yourself to fin it, fat it, etc. You've got to, there's no chip in golf, in my eyes. I can't think of one, or pitch. So you're not going to fly and get it over that sort of object you're trying to go over, whether it's water or a bunker. You've got to have the weight forward, but you've got to shallow the angle of attack. Now, you're not trying to lift. You're just trying to come in nice and level, really. That, with your weight forward, should get the right connection. So, again, you are using the bounce a lot more in this shot. The bounce goes underneath the ball, and off it pops up in the air. Lean too far back, and you're hitting up at it, and that's when you're sculling it, and off it goes. It's flying through the back of the green, or it's straight into the bunker lip, etc. So it's a tricky one. Takes a bit of practice, but it's definitely, again, don't lean back, don't lift up, get that weight forward.
Right. We're going to get to Tim now.
Yes. Back in.
Yeah,
Very
Tim.
good.
So there are a few questions for you.
Yes.
How do you play out of a deep divot?
How do you play out of a deep divot? Again, let me get a golf ball. So when you're in a situation, and I tend to obviously do this naturally. I do teach it, but it's not usually the first thing I tend to try and do. But if you've got the golf ball sitting down in a divot, which means that it's going to be much more difficult for you to get the golf club head into the back of the ball. The key thing here is strike, and to get the correct strike, you're going to have to make sure that your angle of attack is a little steeper. So you would play the ball further back in your stance to encourage that. You may even push your hands slightly further forward, which will mean lean off the club slightly. But again, that'll just make sure that you're getting the golf ball first, it's sitting down. If you don't, and you catch the ground, you're going to hit the ball heavy, and it means that you're going to take the divot before the ball. The key here is getting the golf ball first, which means that you are going to take and make a bigger divot if you do it properly, which means you're going to have to get that divot back, fill it in, and hopefully somebody behind you isn't going to get in the same situation. It's not very nice. Depending what obviously type of length of shot you've got, but let's just say it's a mid to short iron. It's making sure that you get the strike right. What will happen, let me just tell you now, is that you'll arguably want to use a club that's less for the distance. So if it's an 8 iron, you may want to play it with a 9 iron, purely because you're going to take the loft off, and your distance control is very difficult to actually keep hold of. It's not an easy shot to play. You're trying to recover and get somewhere towards the green, or indeed on the green.
Okay, so Tim, this is a question for most golfers. On an iron shot, what are the key factors for a good solid contact? So what are the things you got to do to make sure that you make good solid contact?
First of all, by starting with the good fundamentals, so make sure that your ball is in the correct position, which I was going to talk about in a second. What is the correct position? You've obviously got a good grip and you've got a good setup. The good solid contact comes from obviously being able to make a good swing at it. So it's a lot easier to make a good or correct swing if you're set up correctly in the first place. And the second thing is, try and just maintain control of the club. Don't ever get to the point where you're trying to hit the ball too hard for your body, or you're swinging the club too fast for how your body moves. It's important that there's an element of control maintained throughout. So you're trying to make sure, just took the garden up. So you're trying to make sure that as you're swinging, you're coming back and you're trying to swing nicely all the time with a bit of rhythm. That will help the golf club find the ball out the centre. If you tend to swing the club very fast with your arms, which we've discussed before, and you don't move the body on at the same speed or the right speed in relation to that, you'll get out of sync and the club will move into a variety of positions. It will lose its path, and if it loses its path, it's not going to strike it very easily out of the middle. So it's trying to feel. Probably sometimes I'd say to people initially, even if they're practicing at the driving range, maybe try and hit a few shots where you're trying to slow down. So try and say to yourself, I'm going to hit this 7-iron 100 or 120 yards rather than 150 that you usually would aim for example, and you'll end up hitting the ball probably 30 yards further because your contact is better because you've maintained control.
Okay, Tim, the next question is it okay for junior golfers to jump while hitting the ball?
To jump?
Yeah, you see a lot of youngsters jump when they're hitting the ball at impact. Would they hit it longer if they stop jumping?
Right, I'm going to tell you one thing now, and this is I didn't know this question was coming. There's only one person I've ever played with that's jumped when they hit the ball, and that's Indrajit. That's you, Indy. Your feet were off the ground like Bubba Watson when you used to hit the ball, and I've never seen anybody create so much clubhead speed as you when I've played with you. Unbelievable. So personally, I wouldn't be advocating it, but some of these youngsters, some of these kids, they create such a lot of power. They're tall, they're slim, they're so flexible that it's potentially the only way that they can actually get their body to turn through. So it's not that it's necessarily wrong. It's just that for me, you're arguably relinquishing, again, the control of the club. But if you can do it, Indy did it, Bubba Watson did it, there'll be other people out there. If it works, maybe talk to your coach about it.
Right. So, Tim, the next question is coming steep and coming shallow into the ball. Is it necessary? You've already talked about coming steep into the ball with the ball in the divot, but what are the advantages of coming shallow into the ball?
Well, the advantages of coming shallow into the ball mean that your obviously your angle of attack is definitely shallower there. So you're more likely to hit the ball with the correct loft, which is the club that you've chosen. You're arguably more likely to start the ball in a more down the path that you're aiming on, as opposed to steep, which tends to mean that the club is coming across the line of the ball and will often start left. Not always. It depends obviously on the club face position and the person and the grip. But the problem with coming shallow, depending again on your standard, I mean, it's a real general question here, is that the strike tends to be a little cleaner. And for most people, because as Lee was talking to when they're hitting these, is that people tend to lean back anyway as they hit the ball because they're trying to, because they struggle getting the loft on the ball, they tend to lean back, which puts loft on. And if they try and get the club too shallow, it will often get them to do that. So whenever I usually find, for example, that if I'm teaching 10 people, I'd say 8 out of 10 are always coming in steep, and I'm trying to shallow them out. I'm not trying to necessarily get people to go shallow. I'm trying to shallow them out back to what would be a better angle of attack, because most people are just very, very steep onto the ball. It's a tough one without seeing somebody swing it into that one. I can't hear you now, Indy. I think you're muted. That's it.
Questions on short game.
Okay, say that again. Sorry.
If you can get over to Lee.
Yes,
Lee, are you there?
Yeah.
So Lee, somebody asked a question about Phil Mickelson. Do you follow Phil Mickelson at all?
A little bit, yeah. I like some of his stories on Twitter. They're quite funny. Yeah,
so somebody mentioned that about his ball position being in the middle of the stance. Could you talk about, how, or let's change the question. Why do you think Phil is so successful with the flop shot?
To me, it's a lot of practice. I think he's practiced a lot, especially as a youngster. He used to mess around a lot. I know, for instance, Sevi, who's obviously a very good short game player as well. He used to have a 3-iron on the beach when he was a kid and used to manipulate it all he could. Now, like we said before, that there's no textbook way to hit a flop shot, really. A lot of the times, if you can manipulate your body to suit where the ball is, you can do it. It's a lot of the time for people, though, again, if your ball's in the middle of your feet and you lean back, or sort of lean back's the wrong word. If you stay central, you'll be able to hit the flop shot. Okay. I personally actually prefer people to have it further forward, so then they can feel like they can lean onto it a lot more. I think sometimes when the ball's in the middle for sort of the less capable golfers, they feel like because the ball's in the middle, it gives them the license to lean back through the shot and try and lift it. So, but again, there is no absolute right or wrong way. But I think what you'll find, even though he has the ball in the middle of his stance, he will still have his weight on his front foot. There's no way you'll be able to hit that flop shot without having the weight forward of the ball. Otherwise, and sometimes they do it. To be fair, you watch a tour event, a lot of the times you'll see one come flying out of the bunker or flying when he's trying to just flip it over a bunker. They do finish. They're not robots. They do make mistakes as well. Yeah.
And Lee, aren't they sometimes using a 62 or a 64 degree?
Well, yeah, that's the other thing as well. And the other thing when we'll talk about obviously adaptations to the bounce, etc. Moving around, you've got different lofts, and when you start moving the club face open and shut, etc., you start changing the bounce. Well, that means it gives you license to do a few more different things then all of a sudden. So it's complex, as in there's no rule book, but yes, there's lots of different ways of doing these things. What personally, from when I've been teaching people, I tend to find that it's better to try and get them to do a simplistic way, and then if they find slight adaptations from that, then brilliant, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, Lisa, one more question to you before we go back to Tim. Tell us a little bit about club selection around the greens. We see people taking out their wedge moment even if it's like a basic bump and run shot, they probably take out a lob wedge. How do you choose clubs? I mean, how do you decide what club you're going to use when you reach a ball around the green?
It's a great question, that, because it's one of the biggest ones that gets abused. The amount of people, as you say, the thing that always scares me when I'm talking to someone, giving them a chipping lesson is, but I like to use my pitching wedge, or I like to use my sand wedge or my lob wedge. Well, to be honest, that always strikes fear into me, because I think your golf clubs are a bag of tools. You've got to be able to use them all. You'll need all your tools. If you were doing some house renovations, you need all your tools. You'll need all your golf clubs in your bag. Now, for me, the simple rule that I have, and I think if you watch the tour, all of these guys on the tour generally do this. There might be this slight odd exception, but generally what you'll tend to find is if you're off, let's say you've missed the green, you're to the side of the green, okay? And let's just say the green is, I don't know, 30 feet long, okay? And the flag's at the back, you've missed it short. If you've got the best part of 27 foot of green in front of you, the last thing you want to be doing is making a big swing with a high lofted club to get the ball to the back. And basically, the longer the swing you're taking, the more risk you're taking, okay? So you want to get the ball rolling as quick as you can. If you're getting the ball rolling as quick as you can with a less lofted club, then that means you're taking less of a swing. It means you're taking less of a risk. A lot of people out there will be saying now, well, I don't really like playing 7 irons or 8 irons or 9 irons and chipping with them. I like my sand wedge. But unless you practice these things, you won't ever break that habit. You've got to practice it. And I promise you, if you got 10 balls with a lob wedge and 10 balls with an 8 iron and tried to play into a flag that was at the back of the green, you will generally get the 8 iron ones closer as a group than you will do the lob wedge ones. So my rule basically is, when you miss the green, look where the edge of the green starts in front of you. So you've got the edge of the green, and then the flag. Take one big jump from the edge of the green onto the green. You don't have to literally do this, because this is what you're imagining. One big jump from the edge of the green onto the green, and that is your landing point, okay? Then whatever club you think you can get to land on that point and stop in time for the flag is the right club. And you play that club regardless of what it is, whether it's an 8 iron, a lob wedge, or a 7 iron. So you've got the edge of the green, one big jump on, because you don't want to be landing it an inch over the fringe. You want a bit of room for error. One big jump on, there's your landing point. Right, what club? I know I've got to land that there. Wherever that flag moved, that's your landing point. Now, what club will give me the right roll to actually to get that ball to stop in time for the flag. And that's the way I'd look at it. I know a lot of the guys on tour do that. A lot of them,
just jump in there for Lee a minute, Indy. Absolutely bang on. Couldn't agree more. And the way I say to people practice that, where they've picked this jump landing zone, which Lee quite rightly points out, just get a couple of golf balls and just underarm them, landing on that point and trying to get near the flag. And that would be your trajectory and your roll of your chip shot. So you just literally underarm them. If the landing point's a lot nearer the flag, because you've got you've got an obstacle to go over, you're going to have to throw the ball higher to land softer on the landing point, which means it will run less. And try and picture the shot, the trajectory of the shot. I get all my guys, and you'll be surprised how many people roll the ball and throw the ball and it goes in the hole. Their ability to actually judge that distance and that landing spot is actually quite naturally, would you not say?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as you say, your arm is becoming the club. Just visualise that, as you say, if the ball's coming out your arm high, it's a lob wedge, etc., sand wedge. If it's coming out low, it's a 7-8 iron. Use your feel, yeah.
So Tim, could you demonstrate a pitch and like a roll chip setup? Tim, I think you've got a club in your hand, so could you just demonstrate a setup for a roll chip?
Yep. So, can you see me all right? Yep. So if I was setting up now to play a roll chip, I have the ball there. It's on a T-peg. It's on a T-peg, guys, just so you can see it. Okay? If I was setting up now for a roll chip, I've personally picked out a 7-iron. And I personally go down the club a little bit. I've got quite a narrow stance, not too wide because I've not got a lot of arm action going on. And I'm making sure it wouldn't be teed up. I'm making sure that my club's square behind the ball's towards my right foot, and I've taken a little bit of loft off. Not a lot. I don't want to get too much shaft lean because that's going to cause me a problem when I make my stroke. Just a little bit forward there, and my stroke would then follow literally that. Not going off. And that's what I would be doing. There'd be none of this. More importantly, you know the ball's not going to go very high because you've selected a 7-iron. You know you're not going to land it 5-3 and it's going to roll. So don't, which is what a lot of people will do and try and lift it and lean back. So they'll panic because they'll think I'm chipping. I've got to get the ball in the air. So rather than just trusting it and just letting the club face go through the ball, just lead backwards, they'll try and do this for the last minute and lift it up there. And you'll see the body and the body weight start to change mid-swing. Their intentions during the swing are usually pretty good, but as soon as they play the shot, it tends to go. They don't trust it, which is why what Lee said, all these shots here, you can save. We do a lot of short game lessons at our golf club. I reckon I could save people 7 or 8, 9 shots around after 4 or 5 short game sessions, probably 1 shot every other hole by picking the right club and then just trusting the right technique. And obviously then understanding a few practice drills to make sure that it's kind of ground in.
Right. Tim, if you could talk about lag. A lot of people misunderstand how to create lag in their swing. People talk about lag giving you distance. So would you like to talk about and just demonstrate what actually lag is and how to create lag? I know it's a little bit for the advanced players, but if you could just talk about creating lag in a golf swing.
What we're trying to do here is create the golf club is trying to actually stay behind the hands for as late as possible and to then get this quick snap through impact. Okay. Now, obviously, it's trying to maintain. Once you've swung back here, it's trying to maintain the shape that I'm in here, and stopping the club, releasing very, very early from the top of the swing or hitting from the top, which is what a lot of people do. Is trying to create that so it's very, very late in here. Now, what happens is if you don't get it, if you're not an accomplished player, you can leave the club face way behind the hands because you've over committed, and you'll leave the club face very much open. So you're trying to create this feel where you're starting the club down. You're feeling like pulling the club down without too much happening to the shaft. And then right at the end, oof, it releases into the ball. It's very much a technique that would require quite a lot of practice. You'll create quite a lot of distance from it. You'll probably improve your strike because you improve your angle into the ball. And you'll get this very much late hit as you're coming in, which is how it's referred to a lot of the time in the game. But what you'll also find is you'll probably have a mixed bag of results. You'll find that you'll hit some fantastic shots, and then you'll obviously hit some poor shots based on the fact that it's really difficult to create that feel. You would need an instructor to get in with you and really kind of work on that feel. To learn something like that from a video or a book, personally, I think would be not easy to do.
Okay. So Lee, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
Lee, you've played a lot of tournament golf, and I'm sure you've played a bit in Scotland too. So what's so different about playing on Scottish golf courses? We have some of our juniors sometimes go out to Scotland and play, and they're completely lost. The first time I went to Scotland to play, I had no idea what to do. Yeah. How do you handle Scottish courses?
Well, I would categorise them a lot basically as links courses generally, because a lot of the Scottish courses do tend to be links courses. You get the idea.
Yeah, well, I meant links courses. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, and to me, the game changes a lot, because unless you're very lucky and you get a day where, and actually myself and Tim last year went up to Turnberry and played up there, and. Unless you're very lucky, and we were lucky actually, and we got 3 glorious days, and the sun was out, and there wasn't much wind, etc. Then that's not going to happen much, because to be honest, we played it, and it wasn't that bad. I mean, our scores won't suggest that, but the actual defence of the course went a little bit with the wind. But obviously, when you do get the wind, and I've played Carnoustie, I've played Turnberry, I've played Royal Dornoch, a lot of courses up Scotland, and obviously I've played a lot of the Birkdales of the world, Royal Liverpools down this way. Then if the wind's there, then basically, to me, maybe with the exception of tee shots, every other shot on the golf course changes. So to me, a lot of the times when you try and play a normal golf shot on those courses in those conditions, your ball will just light up. If you try and hit anything at full pelt with full sort of normal setup and not try and take the loft off it, generally the wind will just take it away from you. So I tend to find when you're in those conditions, trying to actually club down, slow the swing down a little bit, or make it a bit smoother, not as much acceleration, try and keep the ball lower, bring the control back to yourself, rather than let the wind take it. I'd never really feel comfortable with playing a links golf and hitting the ball down the line and hoping for the wind to take it, etc., because you just don't know how much it's going to get a hold of it. Definitely, yes, there's a lot more running of shots. There's a lot more of low flighted shots when you can. Obviously, sometimes some of the pop bungers, etc., mean that you can't do that. But they tend to be firmer, faster. Sometimes a little bit more open, because there's not obviously many trees, etc. But I find that harder actually, because when there's not that definition to the hole, I find that the wind obviously hits your ball a lot more. There's nothing to protect it, and visually it's hard to sort of picture a hole when there's no trees lining it. You sort of think, well, I'm okay over there, especially if it's a blind one. A lot of blind shots, hit it over there. Oh, I'm not okay. So it's tricky. It is tricky. I've got to be honest. I do prefer the actual Parkland golf, but because it is quite tough, the links golf, but very, very different, and nice for a different test every so often.
Right. So the next question is for Tim.
Yes.
Tim, you've been to the Masters recently, I think a couple of years back. Can you tell us about the golf course and the atmosphere? Because I don't think many people have been to the Masters. So can you just tell us a little bit, and then we come back to some more golf tips?
Yeah. So basically, lucky enough to go in 2018 when Patrick Reed won, and indeed last year when Tiger Woods came back. So I went 2 years in a row with a group from my golf club. Year one, 2018, was literally, it's coming up on my Facebook time 2 years ago at the moment. So I'm getting all the memories. Literally in dreamland, from pulling up and parking the car to then making the short walk into the golf course. It was unbelievably surreal. There's a lot of people, about But once you get into that golf club, there is, if you could describe perfection, it is Augusta National. The divot mix is green. Everything is color coded in there. You don't see anything out of place. I did not see one weed. In fact, we had to check and touch the grass to make sure it wasn't artificial. It was that good. You know, the service from everybody around the place, the staff, they are so friendly. You know what the Americans are like anyway. They're very, very good on service levels, but they are super friendly. But the golf course is so undulating and hilly. The climbs are just huge. The climb from the 10th green back up to the 10th tee. If you remember where Bubba Watson hit that fantastic wedge shot 7 or 8 years ago to win his first Masters in the playoff. I mean, when you can still go and stand in that area. There's no plaque up there, but you think, wow, number one, how's he got it out the trees and onto the green? But then you just look back up to the tee, and it's literally a climb like that. Just utter perfection, Indy. And of course, like last year, being around the 18th green when Tiger came up the last and watched him knock that putt in was something that I will definitely remember forever. And I'm looking at going again next year, not this year in November, because I'm already committed in theory if we're back to normal going somewhere. But next April, I'm trying to get another group to go out there and play some golf as well, because we tend to play a little bit golf when we go. I go for a week just so that you know, and I go on a Tuesday, which is a practice day, which is when you can't take your phone in, but you can take a camera in, and you can take all your pictures. And then I've gone on the Sunday, so I've gone Tuesday and Sunday both times. So I've seen the final round and watched everybody. Amazing. So, you can go, it's worth it.
So Tim, just coming back to that last question which I asked Lee about, choosing clubs around the green. I think there are a few youngsters want you to also kind of give your point of view, which was, I mean, the way Lee put it, maybe you could put it in a little different way, or you could add to it or just repeat it. But people actually don't know how to pick a club around the green. So I think if you talk about it once more.
Yes. Okay, so what Lee was saying was trying to obviously pick a landing point. So basically, you're trying to kind of all the time, the way I tend to teach it, if you've got no obstacle in front of you, you're trying to make sure that you're picking, I'd say, probably the least lofted club that you can get to do the job. That means that the ball's not in the air as much. It's obviously going to hit the ground a little sooner and roll a bit more like a putt. So it's arguably easier to judge. So you're trying to pick this landing point, which would be what Lee describes as a good jump on the green. So probably 3 or 4 feet on the green. And you've got to then just think, right, if I land it there, what loft do I need to get it near the flag? Now, everybody's different. And of course, everybody's greens are different. But ultimately, it will probably be less loft than you just migrating to your favourite go-to club, which may be the 56 or the 52, and you play most of your shots with that. There's no harm in practicing different shots with those go-to clubs, because there might be a time when you select it out of literally just feel and confidence, but trying to play the shots that get to the ground and roll like a putt more often, quickly, more often, would be a massive advantage. And we tend to put some, it's difficult to show you here, we tend to put some markers out. So if we're playing, we're here, edge of the green's here, and the pin is further on, we tend to put some cones out where we want the people to land the ball, and the closer that cone gets to the flag means that the more loft they've got to play, and the longer the swing, and the more confidence they need to play that shot. And guess what? That adds up to more shots that are scuffed through the back of the green or hit a little bit heavy. The more success comes with the markers that are closer to us and they're playing less lofted shots, depending obviously on how far the flag is. But ultimately, try and play as little loft as possible, but still allow your ball to bounce first pitch on the green. Does that help?
Right. Okay, so there's a question for Lee. Lee, are you there?
Yes, yeah.
So Lee, somebody's asked a question that have you beaten a Masters winner? So somebody's done some research on you.
Yeah. It's I know it is. Yeah, it is true. Yeah. I did. I beat Danny Willett. Yes, I was when I was playing for Derbyshire Boys as captain. He was the Yorkshire Boys captain. We played each other, went first off for each other in the singles, and I beat him around a local course called Chevin Golf Club, close in Derbyshire. And yes, it was one to savour. our careers went slightly different ways after that, but I don't think he's happy, really. I mean, he could be sat in the
so now that we're on it, why don't you tell us about some of your good tournament performances and some of the good players you played with? People, especially from India, would want to know some of the stars that you played with or some of your good rounds.
Yeah. So basically, in my England and sort of training squad, there was I think you'll know these guys. Obviously, Danny Willett was one. Andy Sullivan, who played in the Ryder Cup. He's on the European Tour. He was in there as well.
Right.
And I'm trying to think of some of the foreign guys who I've played with. Let me think. I've played in.
Was it Ricky Fowler in one of the events you played with?
Ricky Fowler was in British Boys. Yeah, played in that. Ricky Fowler was there. I think Rory McIlroy was a younger kid as well, but he was there. I wasn't directly playing against him that time, but was in the same tournament. And I've got to be honest, and I think the one thing that stands out with all the guys who have made it compared to, because there was some more promising ones that didn't make it, who actually were higher up the pecking order. I mean, there was one guy called Oliver Fisher who is on the European tour, but he was the boy to beat back then. I remember being 16 years old. He signed a multi-million-pound contract with Nike at the time, and he was the one that everyone was looking at. Yeah, he's sort of gone under the radar a little bit, and now really it's. I think the big thing that sort of stands out with the guys who have made it is the fact that they just love golf. They live for golf. That they wake up and going to the practice ground was not a chore. It was enjoyment. I think that's a key element to any of the youngsters who are listening in. That you really need that passion. That it doesn't need to be a job. You've got to make it fun. If it becomes less fun, then and I can hold my hands up and say, to me, I was obviously at a level where I was at a decent level at one point, but generally it became a job for me, and that's when my sort of form dipped off a little bit, let's say, and I sort of went into the teaching role, etc. So it's definitely about keeping it fun. Some of the rounds I've played, I'm trying to think one that stands out more than anything. Obviously, beating Danny Willett was a big one. I've played Andy Sullivan 4 times. He's beat me twice, and I've beat him twice. Again, a similar setting. He played for Warwickshire, I played for Derbyshire. Actually, I still know Andy. I still talk to him every so often. I'm not big best friends with him, but I do know him.
Okay, Lee. So Lee, there's one question which I missed. Is in chipping, should you hit the ball first, or should you hit the ground so that the bounce kind of hits makes contact with the ground, so that you avoid topping the ball? So basically, I think the question is about point of contact. So in chipping, where exactly does the leading edge hit? Does it hit the golf ball, or does it hit behind the ball? Exactly where's the point?
Well, with the bounce, obviously, it just sort of goes hand in hand. But one thing I would say is that it definitely doesn't hit the ground before the ball. So if I get back to I'll just dip the camera down a little bit again. So get back to my sort of mat. So when you're chipping, you cannot. The only time you're going to want to strike the ground before the ball is if you're playing a bunker shot. So, and the obvious thing is people say an inch or two behind the ball. Let's say it can vary again depending on your angle of attack, but you don't want to be hitting any of the ground before the ball with a normal chip shot. What you're looking to do really is you actually, and again, this is where a lot of club golfers struggle, because they go into this lifting mode where they bottom out before the ball or hit up at it. You are looking to hit slightly down on the ball, so your leading edge will probably get the ball first, the bottom side of the ball. It's then, this is where the bounce comes in, what happens after you've hit it. So if you've got a steep angle attack with a low bounce, it goes in and it digs back to the old sort of knife contact, and that's what you don't want. That's when you'll get that digging motion and it stops. If you're coming in sort of too shallow with like the spoon-like object, the high bounce, that's when it will bottom out and go up at the ball and fin it through. So you're looking to really, in my eyes, I think with a lot of people I've taught in the past, you are looking to hit slightly down on the ball, not to the point where you are really trying to knock it into the floor, but you're looking with your weight forward, you are looking to down on the ball, get the ball first really, then the grass afterwards. And a great little tip I do with a lot of people, I'll try and explain it the best I can with the limited resources I've got here, is put 2 tees. Imagine those 2 balls there are 2 tees, and you're going to hit this ball in the middle. So I suppose I'm better doing this with some coasters. That's probably easier to explain. So 2 tee pegs. Imagine these are 2 tee pegs. It's drawing a line in between the 2 tee pegs, and your ball goes down that line. What you can do, you don't even have to be hitting a ball for this. You can take that away, and you can even draw maybe a short line between the 2 tee pegs. What you want trying to do is you're trying to just clip ahead. If you imagine that being the line, in fact, I'll go side on. So if you imagine, if you can see that all right, yeah. If you imagine that's the line between the 2 tee pegs, you're trying to strike just ahead of that line. Bang, just ahead of it. You're not looking to hit behind it and up at it. If you're making marks this side of it, then you're in trouble. You're going to start finning it. You want to hit ahead of the line. So you are hitting slightly down on the ball and through. Okay.
Right. So the last question to you, Lee, before we move back to Tim, is there are a lot of juniors. I think there are about 50 juniors online at the moment. What, according to you, is important if they want to be champion golfers? What are the things they need to be looking at, working on? I'll ask the same question to Tim later, but Lee, with you playing, you've played golf at a very high level. So, what is your advice, and what are your thoughts on how to be a champion?
I think that from my personal experience, as I say, one of the key things for me was, dedication, hard work. Obviously, a lot of short game practice. It does get overlooked a lot. I know it's a classic sort of thing to say, but you will not make it as a golfer if your short game is not up to scratch. You can get around some bad hitting, you can get around hitting it badly off the tee sometimes, but that 100 yards, 80 yards and in is absolutely pivotal. But also keep it fun, because a lot of people, it becomes a chore. It becomes, again, when it turns into a work, then it doesn't become something it's very hard to prosper at, like anything in life. When it becomes something you don't want to do, it's hard to do it well. So keep it fun, lots of drills, lots of games. Especially if you've got a few of you who can all compete against each other. Lucky enough, when I was growing up, I had a few people who I did compete against. We used to have pitching competitions, chipping competitions, but we'd be there for hours, sort of after school, etc. And I think that at the time I didn't realise what it was doing, but that's what drove me on to get to a certain level. To me, that's the importance. Get yourself some clear goals, some clear sort of drills, get in a group, get yourself practicing with each other, keep it fun, and then the results will come. Don't get too sort of result orientated. Think about the process and the goals and having the fun, and the results will come. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Lee. I will just go back to Tim once. Tim, I think there's a request. Maybe he logged in a little late, but if you could just, the question is, what should be a correct driver grip? Now, I'm sure you would say that you just have one grip for all clubs, but just tell us, 2 knuckles on the left hand or the V of your right hand pointing. So what are your checkpoints in a good grip?
Okay, so if we just go back to the molded grip for a minute, which has got a couple of V points here. I mean, this is standard stuff. This is things that we've been going on for years. Nothing's much changed here with technology. And of course, doesn't matter what club this is. I grip the same absolutely every single time. See, my left hand goes on there. I'm always working on seeing those 2 knuckles. I try, because I would, if I was going to personally be anyway, I'd be getting a little bit strong in the left hand, which of course you can see changes straight away my forearm. I'm trying to get those 2 knuckles and that V position here that you can see highlighted up to my right shoulder. And of course, as my bottom hand, my right hand goes in there, I create the next V, which goes just actually inside my right shoulder, between my neck and my shoulder. Now, once I'm in that position there, that is literally what I'm looking to create every single time. If I want some extra length off the tee or things like that, I literally will not change my grip. For the simple reason is I'm looking to hit the ball square. If I can hit the ball square, and get it out the centre of the club face, I feel that I'm going to get extra length anyway. You know what I mean? I might make some changes, adjustments to the size of to the height of the tee. I might literally make some adjustments to the ball position, etc., depending whether I'm going up or downwind or downhill. But ultimately, they are minor. They're minor. I've always found the times where I try and literally jump on it, like Indy will do all the time, I will sacrifice the accuracy that I'm going to get with a poor strike, and I'm going to pay the penalty.
Okay, Tim, this is a very nice question, because this is about one of my favorite golfers of all time. I'm sure it's one of your favorites, about Seve. So somebody's asked that Seve used to chip without, taking any divots, obviously very shallow. What do you have to say about that? Tim, if you could just speak a little louder.
Yeah, sorry, I had to move away from the camera slightly because the sun's changed. It's starting to get dark if I move too close. So, well, Seve is a little bit, for me, is a little bit. He's so natural. I mean, he practiced, on that beach in northern Spain with a stone and a 3-iron on compact sand. If you can imagine that, which probably gave him the edge, really. He was practicing on real, compact sand on that beach, hitting these shots with a 3-iron. He was hitting flop shots with a 3-iron off compact sand with a stone. You've got to just kind of get your brain around that for a minute. That's not normal stuff. So he had got, and a term we use over here all the time, Spanish hands. So he got these Spanish hands, which is basically a term used for somebody that's got a really good short game. And he got the ability to actually use whatever golf club you gave him and create some kind of short game controlled shot out of it. Now, it's not easy. What we're trying to do is make the game easy by using the right clubs at the right time with the right loft and the right bounce. Unless you're going to dedicate literally hours to doing that, it would be almost impossible to gain any kind of game that you could rely on when you're on the golf course. Remember, when you're on the golf course, you've got one chance every shot. You've got to make it as easy as possible. So trying to pull the right club out to do the right one's absolutely fine. If you're practicing, you can play about with whatever, and you can develop some kind of skill. And that's all that Seve did. Very much like Phil Mickelson, who's a modern day version. But Seve probably still edges it for me.
Right. Tim, so the final question is, you've been a professional golfer for close to 30 years, I think. So you've seen a lot of good players come up, and you've seen a lot of good players who didn't make it. What would you tell all the juniors across the world? What are the things they need to work on to give them a good chance of being successful? So what are your thoughts on success, and what they need to do?
For all the juniors, I'd certainly reiterate exactly what Lee said. But what I think is to get that edge on somebody, and which is what you're going to need if you're going to be a champion golfer, or if you're going to be competing as a champion golfer, which is basically what you're aiming to do, is that, and again, I'm not sure what it's like over there in all the parts of the world of the people we're talking to, but first of all, try and play as many different kinds of golf courses as you can. Test yourself in different weather conditions, and more importantly, try and play some of the shots that you wouldn't necessarily play. So put yourself in a situation where you're blocked out around the trees and you've got to hit a low cut with a 4-iron out the rough to get yourself back in play. Try and utilise some of your practice rounds and your practice situations to develop the skill for all the shots that you're going to need to actually be able to draw on and to actually pull out to deliver a score, because Lee quite rightly says keep it fun, keep it interesting, but at the same time you've got to be competitive, and you've got to make sure that you've got that edge against your competitor, that you can actually grind a par when you're in a situation where you shouldn't have really done it. Look at the people like Mickelson and Tiger and Seve over the years that have been able to pull off the shot because they've practiced it. So test yourself with those different shots, low shots, high draw, low cut, etc., in different conditions, and play as many different golf courses as you can, because they will then mean that wherever you go, you're going to have experienced the conditions.
I think if I could just jump in there as well, I think one of the other big key things that doesn't get utilised enough, especially over in this country, is stats. Stats are absolutely massive to actually seeing your weak points. Now, for any of the youngsters who are listening in, that make sure you try and record as many stats as possible. Keep them on a spreadsheet or even on just a piece of paper. It doesn't matter. As long as you've got them down, compare them to the European Tour, to the PGA Tour. Right, am I hitting enough fairways? Am I hitting enough greens in regulation? What's my strokes gain like? Just basically look at your goals, because you may think, oh, I know, but I need to work on my game. I need to work on my chipping or my driving or whatever it is. But actually, a lot of times when I've done this in the past, and I used to have spreadsheets galore, is that I've looked down and gone, no, actually, it's not what I thought was the problem. Looking at this and looking at compared to on the tour what they're doing, it's actually, do you know what? I thought it was my chip and it's not. It's me putting them. I'm having way too many, etc. So
that's an excellent point. We use apps where we record stats, so we use the technology. Only the serious children do it. So Lee, before we part, what's your last advice to all golfers? And before that, we would definitely be getting you back on in the future to come and do some sessions for golfers in India and across the world. Thank you so much for coming on, Lee. And one last word from you before we speak to Tim for a minute before we wrap up. So over to you.
I think basically, any sort of level of golfer, I think every year set yourself your goals, which may include stats. A lot of people go for handicap goals or winning goals, etc. But there are a lot of the times things you can't sort of control. So get yourself some goals. If they're stats goals, brilliant. And then think, right, okay, how am I going to achieve this? When I work with the England squads, we didn't just go, right, I want to go and win the British Boys Championship. Well, everyone wants to win the British Boys. Okay, well, how am I going to get there? Okay, right. I feel looking at my stats, I need to put more yardage on. Okay, does that mean I need to go and work in the gym or stretch or more, whatever? Okay, so get your goals, then set the mini goals off the side, and that will then give you a clear pathway to get into that big goal. A lot of people are too general about, I want to do this, I want to do that, when they don't think what I'm going to do to get to that end point. So use the little goals to build to the big goals. And as I say, keep it fun. Otherwise, you'll end up, you won't play in the end if you don't keep it fun. So I've seen too many club golfers come in. Yes, you'll have your good rounds, brilliant, keep level. But when you have your bad rounds, also keep level. Don't get on top of yourself. It's very much a game where you can have 9 holes of brilliance and 9 holes of the poorest golf of your life. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. And you've just got to take it on the chin sometimes and get to the next round rather than being up and down with your sort of, oh, I'm here, then I'm here. You can't be like, you've got to be a very level playing field. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lee. It was great having you on the show.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thanks.
If we could have one last word from Tim, though, I'm sure both of you will be back on this channel in the future. But Tim, what's your message for all the golfers, especially the golfers in India?
Yeah, well, again, certainly the main thing is what keeps you going out onto the golf course is definitely enjoyment. Try and vary what you're doing when you go out there. Definitely put some dedication and work into when you're off the course and try and obviously perfect your technique. But when you're going onto the golf course, literally go and have some fun, play some different types of formats. Like Lee said, work towards your goals, whether that be handicap coming down or shooting sub 80 or sub 75 or sub 70. Use that focus in statistical information that Lee's mentioned and kind of work on those weaknesses. In fact, work on your weakest part of your game, and statistics will do that. If it's out of bunkers because you're not getting the ball in the right sector of the green or you're not getting up and down often enough, you've got to go and work to do that. And one of the things that might help you, and of course I'm sure Indy can help you out here, is that make sure you've got the right equipment, make sure that you've been custom fit. If you're going to take golf seriously, spend some time with people on wedge fittings, putter fittings. We do lots of putter fittings at the golf club, making sure that the putters have got the right loft on for the type of stroke that you've got. Mainly work quite closely on that. Make sure you're getting the right driver and irons. It's not literally about just selling you a set of clubs off the rack. If you're going to take it seriously and try and get to that next level, whether that be score or handicap or both, you must have the right equipment. Then the technique will be a lot easier and for you to get some results.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for coming online.
No problem.
And we will definitely catch up. We're going to be ending the session right now. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions for Lee or for Tim, please mail it to us and we will be sending it to them. And be rest assured they'll be back on the channel very soon. Thank you so much. Thank you.